Welcome to This Week in the Triangle. I am Stephen Horn. I'm an independent journalist here, and we're going to talk about local news happening here in our neck of the woods in North Carolina. So we have a couple stories this week out of Wake County, Johnson County, and Durham. So first off, sorry, I'm still getting the hang of this. First off, we have a story out of the Wake County public school system. So some of y'all may have seen reporting back in 2023 and 2024. Or I guess it was in 2024, WRAL investigated a story relating to a teacher who had been accused of abusing special needs students in his care. So some of the parents had noticed that their students had come home with unexplained bruising, and they received an anonymous letter saying that this particular teacher was responsible. So they had gone to the school administration about this, but unfortunately they had not heard that the school was taking action. So they eventually reached out to WRAL and said, "Can you take a look at this?" And so one day after WRAL contacted the school or the district in April, that teacher resigned, and a few months later, 6 months later, James Renter, that teacher, was found guilty in court of 6 counts of assaulting persons with disabilities. So it turns out these rumors, these reports of abuse were substantiated. There is testimony at trial, and he was found guilty. But he was sentenced to a 60-day suspended jail sentence. So basically, if he violated the terms of probation, he would have to serve those 60 days in jail. Otherwise, he would not have to serve any jail time at all. But he was, of course, no longer a teacher. But that is not where the story ends, because WRAL investigated further, and they found that at least 10 employees of the Wake County school system had been made aware of these accusations over this 18-month period between when the first reports of this abusive behavior occurred and the WRAL report. Now, it wasn't until after the WRAL report that the school district reported these assaults to law enforcement. So this is obviously not how it should happen. It shouldn't take a TV station intervening for the district to have some accountability, and it certainly shouldn't take 18 months, because what the reporting is that this teacher was not suspended. So he continued to be teaching at that high school, and he was also transferred to a middle school where he was teaching at a middle school in Fuquay-Varina before he was eventually charged by law enforcement and was eventually found guilty. But the news this week is that the principal of that school, East Wake Magnet High School, Stacy Alston, has been moved from his role as principal. Now, you may think that if you if you were made aware that one of your teachers was abusing students and you waited 18 months until it was disclosed to the public before you reported that to law enforcement, you might think that's a big deal. But for Alston, instead, he is being shuffled to a back-end role as a senior administrator. And not only that, he is getting to keep his salary of over $140,000. So this is way above the ordinary salary for a senior administrator position. We have the salary schedule, and so basically they have salary bands. So they can pay people a little more or a little less than the average for the position, but the middle of that salary band for a senior administrator position is $84,000. But Allison is going to keep his $140,000 salary as he is moved to this position as senior administrator. So from where I'm looking at that's not really much of a demotion. He gets to keep his salary, and he gets to keep a job in the department, though it is not as public facing as his role as principal. And the next story we have is out of Johnson County. It is quite a large one. There is a Republican member of the Johnson County Board of Education named Ronald Johnson Jr., and he had been accused of extortion, filed charges. Despite these charges pending, he was reelected in the last election. But come January of this year, last week and this week, they finally got to trial, and there was public testimony from the congressional candidate he allegedly extorted, from fellow school board members, from a teacher he was, well, I think two teachers he was having affairs with while he, as a married man, was a member of the Johnson County Board of Education. And at the end of the trial on Friday, he was convicted and found guilty by a jury, and he was sentenced to arrange prison time with a minimum of 6 months imprisonment to a maximum of 17 months. And he also received a suspended sentence of 16 to 29 months and 30 months probation. And as part of the sentence, he was removed from the school board and was ordered to surrender his law enforcement license. So Johnson was a former police officer at the Smithfield Police Department. I believe he is currently suing the department over the circumstances of his departure. Um, so obviously, that this would not have been the result he was hoping for, but that would be interesting to run over some of the allegations here. As we see, I went through all of the reporting from each day of the trial, from the News and Observer's reporting that was present, to kind of give an overview. So basically, the the extortion charge was related to another Johnson County man who was previously a congressional candidate and was a congressional candidate at the time that Johnson extorted him. So his name is Devan Barber the Fourth. So he ran in the GOP primary for the 13th congressional district in 2022 as well as 2024, and so during his 2022 campaign, uh, basically Ronald Johnson called him over for a meeting. I believe it was in the parking lot of a Clayton gym where Johnson had an office, and he played Devan Barber a recording. And what this recording was of a conversation between, it gets pretty complicated here. It was a conversation between Ronald Johnson and Angela Barber, who is not related to Devan Barber, but it was Angela Barber telling Ronald Johnson that Devan Barber had this inappropriate conversation with her. So during this period of time, Ronald Johnson was married, Angela Barber was married, Devan Barber was married, none of them to each other. And once again, no relation between Angela Barber and Devan Barber. So basically, Ronald Johnson plays Devan Barber this recording of Angela Barber saying that Devan Barber had these inappropriate communications with her, and says basically, hey, it would be bad for your congressional campaign if this got out, because once again, Devan Barber is married, not to this woman, to his wife. And so what Ronald Johnson wanted out of Devan Barber is that he wanted Devan Barber to get Angela Barber to write a letter saying that she had not had an affair with Ronald Johnson, because Johnson was running for re-election as school board in 2022. Yeah, I believe, if I recall correctly, they're 2-year terms. He was running in 2022, running in 2024. He was you know, running for re-election. So that was the basis of the allegation charge. To sum it up, Ronald Johnson wanted Devan Barber to convince Angela Barber to write a letter saying that Angela Barber had not had an affair with Ronald Johnson. But Angela Barber had an affair with Ronald Johnson, and she'd also had received these inappropriate conversations from Devan Barber. Once again, they're all married, not to each other. So that was a testimony on the first day of trial. On the second day of trial, we had Angela Barber testifying to her affair that she had with Ronald Johnson, and she said that Johnson had requested that she record some conversations at a GOP convention. Apparently, Johnson was big into recording people without their knowledge, and apparently, and what she testified is that Johnson requested that basically she make a sex tape with Devan Barber, presumably for further blackmail material. And so basically this is I hate reporting on stories like this, but this sort of degeneracy that is happening in some Republican political circles, uh, I think it is relevant for the public to know, because this is not stuff that should be going on. And since the jury was subjected to this, I'll subject you to the overview as well. Maybe not get into all these details, but basically, the conversation that Ronald Johnson had recorded with Angela Barber, that was this damaging material against Devan Barber, was that Devan Barber one night when he was drunk, he had been calling Angela Barber, and he also FaceTimed her while not wearing any clothing. So that was basically what Angela Barber had told Ronald Johnson, which he recorded and then used to try to blackmail Devan Barber into convincing Angela Barber to write this letter saying that she had not had the affair that she actually did have with Ronald Johnson. And so the third day was testimony from Kevin Donovan, also a Republican member of the Johnson County Board of Education, and I guess sort of a former ally of Ronald Johnson's politically. Ronald Johnson helped him get elected. However, Donovan became sort of I guess disillusioned with some of what Johnson was asking him to do. So Donovan received immunity from the prosecutor's office for his testimony because he had recorded a conversation when the Johnson County District Attorney's Office was investigating Ronald Johnson. He had recorded the investigator's I guess interview that Donovan had with that investigator and gave it to Johnson, which obviously is is not something that like you doing if you are trying to sort of obstruct the investigation. But since Donovan received this immunity deal, he will not be prosecuted for what he admitted to doing. And so what Donovan also testified to is that Angela Barber had told her about her relationship with Ronald Johnson, but Johnson had told Donovan that it was not true until after the 2022 election, when Johnson came clean about it to Donovan, another ally, another Republican ally on the school board, Michelle Antoine. I believe, I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly, Michelle Antoine. Um, After the 22 election, where Johnson said, "Oh, actually, I did have this affair." She was telling the truth. So messed up situation all around. And so another one of the charges was that Johnson was convicted of was willfully failing to discharge his duties. And one count of this related to the testimony from Clayton High School principal Bennett Jones, and also Owen Phillips. So basically, Phillips was a former colleague of Johnson on the Smithfield Police Department, and he had worked together with Johnson. He had done some things at Johnson's request, but Johnson eventually decided that Phillips had leaked some damaging material that had been published on a Facebook Live. So what he did was he went to the principal of the high school where two of Phillips' sons attended. His sons were autistic and were in some sort of special program at the school, and Johnson was trying to get Jones to have them removed from the school or from that program. Basically, make this decision regarding their education based not on their educational needs, but in retaliation for what he believed his former colleague had done. And so once again, Johnson was convicted on all charges. So there's also testimony from a Superior Court judge who knew both Angela Barber and Ronald Johnson politically. So Paul Holcomb, the judge, he testified that Angela Barber had told him about this blackmail situation, and that he had recommended that she not give in to Johnson's demands, and that she not write this false letter, this false statement that Johnson was trying to get out of her, and that she reconcile with her husband. I guess stop having affairs with people. And so the second charge of, or I guess no, this was this was a charge of obstruction of justice. So basically, there is a charge of obstruction of justice. What they said was that the investigator from the district attorney's office, he came to the Clayton gym where Johnson had his office. he sees a cell phone inside, and he says, "Let me go get a search warrant to look for this cell phone." But when he gets a search warrant, comes back, the cell phone is gone. And so basically, what the charge of obstruction of justice was that Johnson had been alerted that the investigator had came by his office, and so he went back to his office and removed that cell phone so that the investigator could not get hold on it. And so basically, the final charge for I keep forgetting the wording, which is the willfully failing to discharge duty. So there's a second charge of that relating to him recording a closed session of the Johnson County Board of Education that he was a member of. So a closed session is basically a session that's not open to the public, where they discuss confidential things. Sometimes it's related to lawsuits, sometimes, and in this case, it was related to a personnel matter. And so on the last day of testimony, Johnson, his defense had the opportunity to present their witnesses, and so Johnson himself testified. And basically, what his story was is that he did meet with Devan Barber. He did play this recording for him, but that his motive was not to blackmail him, but just let him know. I guess I guess that this was out there. Um, and so basically, his kind of evidence along that regards was that Devan Barber had not obtained the letter or the statement from Angela Barber, and that Johnson had never released the recording. Basically, the argument of, well, if this was a blackmail attempt, I never released the blackmail. Apparently, the the jury did not find that very convincing. Um, and he also testified that when he removed the phone from the office, he was not trying to obstruct justice. He was just worried because people had sort of learned about this investigation, and they had defaced the door to his office. So he was worried about, I guess, people getting inside. So that's why he said he moved the phone. And in regards to recording the meeting of the Johnson County School Board, he said that that he believed the school board was violating the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act in regards to a former teacher who had actually educated Johnson, when he was in a Johnson County school. So he recorded the conversation. That's why he said he recorded it, was because he believed they were violating the law. And in his testimony, he also admitted to having affairs not just with Angela Barber, but with two other women who were also employed by the Johnson County schools. So once again, this is a messed up situation all around. These are certainly not paragons of virtue, um, by any measure. So on the last day, Friday, the jury deliberated for 3 hours and found Johnson guilty on all counts. So Johnson was let out in handcuffs after the sentencing, as is the practice in the Johnson County courts, to be in his sentence. So he could be out as soon as 6 months. That is the minimum sentence. And so, Johnson is also removed from his position on the Johnson County School Board, and they will begin filling this position at a meeting on Tuesday. So, whew, I'm glad to be over that story. The less I have to hear about it in the future, the better. And so for this next story is quite interesting. This was a story that actually happened last year, leading up through December, but the court documents were only unsealed this week. And the FBI and the U.S. Attorney gave a press conference. So this is in regards to an ISIS hopeful who was arrested at the airport. The feds say that he was on his way. He was attempting to join ISIS in West Africa. But in fact, he was not in touch with ISIS. He was in touch with a federal covert employee and a federal confidential human source who are merely posing as people who could get him in as an ISIS fighter. So let's head over to that article. We have aspiring jihadist arrested at RDU after ISIS facilitator turns out to be fed. And that is what happened. So, Alexander Alec Justin White is a 29-year-old resident of Durham. And he also went by Suleiman al Amriki. That means Suleiman the American in Arabic. That is the sort of nom de guerre that he chose, or, perhaps also a religious name that he chose when he converted to Islam in 2015, according to the court documents. So basically, most of the information in this article is from the court documents, so you can just assume that any facts I'm talking about are coming through the lens of the FBI and the Department of Justice. So you can take it with a grain of salt, if you will. So basically, he was living in Durham on University Drive. ABC 11 spoke with one of White's neighbors who said he seemed like he was an American. He didn't seem to have any kind of foreign accent or anything. And from the voter records that I was able to find, this appears to be the case. The voter registration listed his birth state as North Carolina. So this appears to be a white American man who grew up in North Carolina and eventually converted to Islam and decided that he wanted to become a jihadist. So basically, according to the criminal complaint, White attempted to join the Islamic State back in 2018. So he traveled over to Egypt. He had traveled to, I believe, Morocco a couple times as well. He had traveled to Egypt, but the obstacle he ran into was that he did not know anyone who was ISIS affiliated. He didn't know anyone who could get him in touch with the jihadists, and he was aware that there are people out there pretending to be jihadists, pretending to be in contact with the ISIS, or I believe Dalwa, as he referred to it. That there are these people pretending, and if you spoke to them, you would end up getting the attention of the authorities. And that is, of course, what ended up happening to him. So even though he was cautious, he ended up being falling right into a trap that he was aware of. So he said that he was questioned by Homeland Security on his return from Egypt because they were suspicious about his travel, but ultimately it does not appear that the authorities followed up on that trip from 2018. But in the summer of 2024, the criminal complaint includes these posts that he made on his Facebook account. So basically, he had made some posts where he had shared this sort of propaganda, as the DOJ refers to it, celebrating ISIS, celebrating the jihad, celebrating these terrorists and the terrorist state. And so basically, that's what he was posting on Facebook. They have some messages from Facebook where he was in contact with various people discussing his desire to join in this jihad. And so on September 10th, 2024, an undercover FBI employee, referred to as an online covert employee in these documents, reached out to White. And so this covert employee was posing as an ISIS facilitator, basically someone who could put White in touch with the genuine ISIS. And so he asked White, what skills do you have that would be of service to the Islamic State? White told him that he had he had skills in using and maintaining firearms. And the document also has some photos which were captured at the Triangle Shooting Academy. This is a range over near the airport, where it seems like he was training. So in one image that he sent to the FBI employee, he talked about practicing using one of these automatic rifles that the Triangle Shooting Academy has available to rent. So this image that he shared here was actually not an image that he took, but an image that is available on Google Maps, as we can see here. So it looks like he just took this image from Google Maps. He put a red circle around this firearm, I believe I have it here. I believe that that appears to be an M249 light machine gun. I'm not a gun expert, but that's what it appears to be. That is available to rent. So basically, he told the covert employee that this was a firearm he would be training with that day. And there's also a picture that the FBI obtained, that once again appears to be from that indoor shooting range where they say this is White practicing with a handgun. So those were the skills. Specifically, he wanted to be a fighter for the Islamic State, and so he had gun skills. He wanted to use these gun skills to fight for Allah in jihad. And so the FBI employee set him up with someone else who was working with the FBI, confidential human source, who is posing as a spokesperson, a spokesman for the emir, the leader of ISIS. So basically, they had this 30-minute call where they're asking him questions. What I guess questions that perhaps a genuine recruiter would want to know about a foreign fighter coming over to join him. And basically, he was saying, "Yeah, I want to come over. I want to fight for the Islamic State." And so basically, this is kind of the summary is that the employee texted him and says, um, basically, we have a spot. You can come out and join our a fighter unit in the Islamic State West Africa Division with other English speaking fighters, and they can be on the front line. And White responded with, Alhamdulillah, everything that I wished for and dreamed about is happening in front of me. So apparently he was very excited about this opportunity to go fight for ISIS. But once again, this was not a real opportunity. This was all concocted by the FBI to show his intent to join ISIS. And so he also purchased some gear. Obviously, these were not weapons because this was what he would be flying with over to Africa. Some military boots, a trauma kit. And so finally, when it got around to December, when he had scheduled this flight to Morocco from RDU, flying through Paris, when he arrives at the airport, they're watching him. He checks in. He goes through security, goes to get on his flight, and law enforcement is there to arrest him because once again, this was all a setup. And so they seized nearly $7,000 in cash with him, and they also found a 1911 handgun in his apartment, which the feds have filed to seize. So one of the things that I found interesting was sort of the level of surveillance that we learned about from this document, this criminal complaint that was just unsealed. And so the document does not reference any search warrants. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they did not receive any search warrants, but we do know that there is a vast surveillance state in place. Some of you have probably heard of the FISA course and the potential for abuse there. So given that this is right up the alley of what the post 9/11 surveillance state was sort of created to monitor, there doesn't seem to be really any indication here of what sort of checks and balances they followed in terms of looking into this information about him. So they had obtained definitely obtained private messages that he had sent with his Facebook account. They do not reference any messages that he sent through, or they reference that he used encrypted messaging applications is what they refer to him. So that's probably applications like Telegram, maybe Signal. They refer to him using these, but they don't have any messages he sent through those other than the ones that he exchanged with this covert employee. And they were also apparently surveilling him in person. So they had the Raleigh-Durham Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is the FBI, as well as local police departments, sheriff departments, state police departments. And we appear to see one photo they included that they took via in-person surveillance. And this photo is not really anything special. It just is a kind of a random day of him walking through the parking lot. And the purpose the reason why this photo was included was to show him breaking in these military style boots that he had bought. And I believe it was the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Attorney Michael Easley Jr. referenced functionally 24-hour surveillance. So apparently, through this several-month period, they were doing quite a bit of surveillance, keeping track of him as this covert FBI employee was exchanging messages, which ended up with him at the airport, ready to go. And there's one other reference to surveillance which I found interesting, which is the specific language is pursuant to information received during the course of the investigation in July 2024, photos of White training with firearms were obtained. Now that language reads to me like they obtained these photos in July 2024, which was before the FBI covert employee made contact with him. So that would sort of be an interesting twist if they were perhaps whoever took this photo sent it to them, or perhaps they obtained it through another means before the FBI employee even made contact with him. So that I found that story sort of interesting, both in terms of the actual threat level, which it does not seem that there is an imminent threat that he would engage in some sort of terrorist act, whether here or abroad, without the intervention of the FBI. But he also seems to have had the intent and the willingness to engage in jihad, engage as a frontline fighter with his firearms when the opportunity presented himself. So it's sort of an interesting story in that way. You have those two sides. And finally, we have an update on a Durham story. So I reported on this story in October of last year. Durham to lower standards for Black firefighters after the Department of Justice finds disparate impact. So basically, um, the Durham Fire Department had been using an exam for entry level firefighters, and what this exam, um, what it asked the firefighter applicants questions on was reading ability, mathematical reasoning, map reading, writing ability, and human relations. And I I reviewed a sample for this test, and this was a very basic test. It's about fourth grade level proficiency in the reading, writing, mathematical, nothing complex, but the questions were written to be specific to firefighting. If you're leaning a ladder up against a building, what's the angle that you need? Or if it's this distance, you need to stretch hose, and you have hose in certain lengths. If you have 350 feet of hose, your hose are 60 feet in length. How many lengths of hose do you need? So once again, these are very basic questions. But what the Department of Justice said was that the Black applicants were failing at a much higher rate, and so this test was unlawfully discriminatory under federal civil rights law. So basically, what the GOJ report said is that 37% of Black applicants failed the examination, as opposed to 11% of white applicants, and 32% of the remaining Black applicants were eliminated to their low score rankings, as opposed to 14% of the white applicants. They basically say the Black firefighter applicants, on average, are scoring lower on this test, so therefore you must throw the tests out. Not only you must throw the tests out, but you have to pay over $1 million in reparations. So that was $980,000 that the city of Durham had agreed in a consent decree to pay to these low scoring Black applicants who had been refused a position due to their score, and also make 16 priority hires from these applicants and pay them a hiring bonus, basically, depending on how long they had been denied this job due to how poorly they scored on this test. But some news. This is from last month as well, but I just saw this, so I wanted to include it as an update. Is that the judge the judge put to the brakes on that consent decree. So basically, what a consent decree is sort of the equivalent of perhaps a plea agreement, but when the Department of Justice is going after a corporation, or in this case, a municipal entity. So the Department of Justice comes with their lawsuit and says, you are violating the civil rights law. The consent decree is what the city of Durham in this case says. Maybe they don't admit guilt, but they say, okay, we are going to remedy this situation, and we agree to do these set of things, pay this amount of money, make these hires. But this is a court case. This is filed in federal court, and ultimately a federal judge has to approve that consent decree. And in this case, the judge said, I would like to hear how this I would like to hear a briefing on relating to a Supreme Court decision regarding disparate impact, which is a theory under which this case was made. And so that is Ricky versus DiStefano in 2009. The Supreme Court, in that case, a Connecticut fire department had, they're hiring for, I guess, the position of captain of fire department in their fire department, and they had the potential candidates for this position take a test to determine, who is most eligible for this position. And what they found is that the white candidates scored much higher than the black candidates. And once again, this is a race blind test. They're not measuring their melanin. They're not doing anything to give them a score based on their race, but nonetheless, due to the distribution of sort of intelligence that is measured in many tests, what they have is that the white applicants scored much higher than the black applicants. And in this case, what this Connecticut Fire Department did is they threw out the results of the tests. And so the white applicants who said, hey, we scored higher on the test, why are you not promoting us in this fair, race neutral process? They sued, and ultimately the Supreme Court said, basically, you have to you can't just throw out a race neutral sort of promotion or hiring test just because um, there is this racial disparity in the outcome. And so the doctrine of disparate impact has not been overturned. That was actually created in Griggs versus Duke Power Company, which some of y'all may be familiar with. Duke Energy. This was actually a case involving a North Carolina company that established this disparate impact theory. So that is an interesting tidbit for people who might care about that. But once again, the current status of this case is that the parties will provide this briefing on how this Supreme Court ruling is relevant to the lawsuit brought by the DOJ and the consent decree that the city agreed to. And I believe there's also at least one amicus filing, basically a third party filing in the case, saying, hey, here's how we think the law applies. So that is the stories for this week. Once again, if you want to receive this weekly roundup and original articles about local news in your inbox week, head over to thisweekinthetriangle.com. It's a Substack. You can put your email in and get these emails about local news and read them for yourself. So if you're joining me tonight, thanks for coming, and I am signing. Someone left a comment on one of my previous streams saying that I should have a sign out or a tag that I use, to let people know that the stream is over. I don't quite have that yet, but thanks for tuning in.